What's up, guys? James here, aka at DFS Jimmy for Tour Level Fantasy, bringing you our brand new form generator. We've gone ahead and put together a new cheat sheet for everybody. We realized our other one was a bit cumbersome to use, and just might have been a little bit too much information. So what we've done is created something a little more distilled, a little more focused, and is a brand new way to look at some stats. Very different than what you've seen out there so far, and I'm sure there's some that are similar, but we really like what we've created here, and I'm going to go ahead and get into it for you. Basically, what we're looking at here, starting over, I've added odds from 5 dimes for everybody, so you can kind of see easily with the color differentiation if you have a value in odds versus the DraftKings pricing versus the FanDuel pricing. We have all three of your sort of pricing metrics built in right here. Currently, the sheet is sorted by DraftKings pricing. As you can see, one of the values that kind of jumps out that everybody's talking about this week is Sung Kang. But you can see right there that he's 7,400 on DK. Odds are 55. Everybody around him is a bit higher in odds. So we've incorporated that to help you see some betting value and just some differentiation there between the pricing. And then as we move over in the sheet, what we have is we have strokes gained off the tee, strokes gained approach, strokes gained ball striking, which is it's only strokes gained off the tee and approach. It subtracts out around the green and putting from total strokes gained to get that number. But anyway, then we have around the green, strokes gained tee to green, putting, and then moving over just a little bit, we have strokes gained against field average, and then green in regulation plus the fringe. And what we have here within each category is basically a quick look back at last week. So right here, if they played last week and they're playing again this week, we have their last week's rank for that category and last week's actual strokes gained. And then moving over, you have their year-to-date number. So that's their year-to-date strokes gained. And then what we have is their strokes gained each week for the last 4 weeks, and then an average of the 4 weeks total versus their year to date. So each one of these is kind of like a rate or how much better or worse they're doing than their baseline year to date performances. So Dustin Johnson, as you see, hasn't played the last couple of weeks. The last week or the previous 2 weeks ago he played, he was right on with his year to date average. That's why we have the 0. And last week he was a little off from his year to date average, even though he was still .90. He was under his year to date average. And then we have the roll up, the average from the last 4 weeks against his year to date. So what this allows you to do is it allows you to see form. All right, so it allows you to see when a guy is trending in a certain category versus another, what part of his game is strong versus another, where he's struggling, where he's not struggling, and where he's maybe finding form. So as we look down through here, one of the guys that kind of stood out to me earlier was Keegan Bradley. Keegan Bradley, I'm sort of a fan of Keegan anyway, so he's a good example. But Keegan last week had a really good performance, gaining strokes off the tee. You know, he's a long, accurate hitter, and his length allowed him to hit less than driver off some, and he was very accurate. For the year, he normally picks up about a half a stroke or almost zero point 0.6 strokes on the field. Um, but last week he picked up 0.53 strokes more than that for a 1.06 full, total over the field. So he's performing twice as good as his year-to-date average last week. And then when you roll that up with his performance 4 weeks ago, he's slightly below his year-to-date average. But you can see that based on last week, he's starting to find some form with his driver and off the tee. That should come in handy this week anyway. But as you move over, you can see that while he's improving off the tee, his strokes gained approach game is struggling a bit. Normally he's about field average, just a little bit better in his approaches this year. But last week he really struggled and gave back 1.5 strokes over and above his normal year-to-date average for a total net loss of 1.17 strokes to the field. Good for a rank of 67th. If a player didn't play last week, obviously, or any other week, those cells are blank, so that nothing calculates. And for most players that have 20 rounds on the PGA Tour, we should have 20 measured rounds anyway. You should have a year-to-date average for them. But that's how the sheet is set up for each one of the strokes gain categories. So it allows you to see what part of a guy's game is rounding into form, where he's really struggling, and What we like to look for is specifically your off the tee and your approaches. That's why, your strokes gained ball striking kind of captures some of that there, where it's just those two. But uh, individually, these are the most important. And when a guy's doing hitting the ball well off the tee or approaching well into the greens, his putting tends to kind of come around right, and his strokes gained around the green are less necessary. If you hit 100% of your greens right, you don't need to get up and down around the green. So we know putting's really variant, so it's nice to look at guys that have their irons in form, but maybe didn't play well the previous week just because they didn't putt well at all. And you'll be able to see that here as we go through. But you can see, for example, Patrick Reed's approach game is really starting to come around from his year-to-date average. So his year-to-date average is a negative quarter stroke loss to the field. And the last 2 weeks, he's been 1.57 strokes better than that and 1.61 strokes better than that for a total net average of 1.82 strokes better than his year to date. And last week he was 12th. He was 12th in the field ranks for strokes gained approach. So Patrick is really starting to get his irons dialed in from some of the struggles earlier in the year. We can see that while he played well a couple of weeks ago and his irons were good at Eagle Point, he really did still struggle off the tee with his driver. And he's starting. You can see that he improved just a little bit, or actually quite a bit from week to week here at the Players last week. So he's starting to find some form with his driver. So Patrick Reed is one that we would say is starting to find a little bit of form, and he's starting to trend. And we know that his putter is one of the better ones in the field. He normally picks up a half a stroke on the field with his putter, so that's been a little down for him. We can expect that to turn around as well. But that's probably a really good rundown of how this sheet should be used and kind of the way we use this sheet to help find some guys that are starting to trend in the right direction. And yeah. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions, please hit us up on Twitter at Tour Level Fantasy. That's you can find me at DFS Jimmy as well, and feel free to reach out and ask us any questions on your own. Anyways, good luck this week.